You wake up in a small, airless room. There are no windows, and the air smells of sweat, fear, and olive oil. The stone walls are cold against your bare skin. In the distance, you can hear laughter coming from the main house. But it's not friendly. It's the kind of laughter that twists your stomach in fear. Your body is sore from the night before. Deep bruises have spread across your ribs in shades of purple and yellow, like something ugly blooming on your skin. A heavy iron shackle is clamped around your ankle, and the skin underneath is rubbed raw. When you shift even slightly, dried blood flakes off. You hear footsteps, slow, deliberate, the sound of heavy sandals slapping against marble. You recognize it right away. It's the overseer. He's coming to get you ready for another day of what they call service. Your hands are trembling as you reach for the thin tunic crumpled in the corner. You're 15 years old, though you stopped keeping track of birthdays a long time ago. Ever since they brought you here, time hasn't felt real. When you're treated like property, days lose meaning. The door scrapes open, loud metal grinding against stone. A harsh beam of sunlight floods the room, and you instinctively raise a shaking hand to shield your eyes. The overseer stands in the doorway, blocking the light. He's huge, all muscle and old scars. His face is hardened, a roadmap of cruelty, shaped by years of breaking people like you. Clean yourself, he barks, throwing a damp cloth at your feet. The master has guests tonight, important ones. His eyes sweep over your body, cold and detached, like someone inspecting livestock. You're going to help entertain them, he says flatly. Your throat tightens. You know exactly what that means. You've known since the very first night, when they dragged you away, kicking and screaming from your village, when they told you that your family's debts were settled in the only way they could manage, by giving them you. This wasn't just your fate. It was the fate of so many boys like you in ancient Greece. It's not the version of history we're taught, the one full of proud talk about democracy and philosophy. That version shines so brightly, it hides the truth in its shadow. Behind the beautiful marble buildings and grand ideas were ugly realities. Behind the famous symposiums and political debates, there was a system that consumed lives like yours. The vulnerable were stripped of their humanity, tossed aside like shattered pottery. Before we dive deeper into these long overlooked stories of survival and pain, I want to thank you for being here. If you're drawn to the hidden sides of history, the ones we're rarely taught, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe. It helps more than you know. And drop a comment below to tell me where you're listening from. It blows my mind that people from all over the world are exploring these ancient truths together, connected across time by a shared curiosity about the past. The process of being chosen, if you can even call it that, started long before you understood what was happening. Maybe your family owed a powerful landowner more than they could ever repay. Maybe raiders tore through your village during one of the many wars that never seemed to end in ancient Greece. Or maybe you were just born beautiful in a world that saw beauty not as a gift, but as something to be bought and sold. Out in the countryside, Greek villages clung to survival by a thread. Life was fragile. A failed harvest, a father's injury, or a sudden death could send a whole family into desperate debt. And when it came time to pay, creditors didn't want promises. They didn't want future income. They wanted something immediate. They wanted bodies. Picture a quiet farming village tucked between old olive groves. The homes are simple, made of mud brick and straw, dirt floors, one-room shelters where families sleep close together to stay warm at night. Children run barefoot between the houses, their giggles mixing with the bleating of goats and the rhythmic scraping of women grinding grain by hand. Life is tough, but it's steady. It's home. Then the drought begins. Week after week, the sun burns down on the fields. The land dries out. Crops shrivel and die. The olive trees, twisted and ancient, offer up only dry, bitter fruit. Barley turns brittle, crumbling at the touch. The wells, lifelines of the village, start to empty. And the families? They start making choices no parent should ever face. First, the animals go. Goats and sheep, their only real assets, are sold off to buy a little time. Then come the heirlooms, bracelets, rings, and the few treasured items passed down through generations. Once those are gone, there's nothing left to give. Except the children. And that's when the hardest decisions are made. The slave merchants arrive like vultures, drawn by the scent of desperation. They set up right in the center of the village, chains and ropes piled at their feet like coiled metal snakes. Ledgers open, filled with names and prices. They don't offer hope. They offer silver, immediate payment for long-term contracts, 20 years of service in exchange for just enough money to keep a family alive through the coming winter. When your children are starving, it almost sounds fair, maybe even generous. But you're 12 years old. You don't understand the trade being made. You only know that your father can't look at you while he's talking numbers. That your mother turns away when the merchant pries your mouth open to check your teeth like your livestock. You feel rough hands on your arms and shoulders, testing your strength, measuring your body, deciding your worth. You hear words like promising, well-built, suitable for household work. But the meaning behind those words, you don't grasp it yet. The merchant counts out silver coins into your father's shaking hands. The metal glints in the sun. Every piece is a year of your life. Your father accepts the payment, even as his fingers tremble. Your mother begins to cry, hiding her face in her shawl. But she doesn't stop him. They tell you it's just for a while, that you'll earn good money, learn new skills, come home a man, maybe even rich enough to buy land or find a wife. They promise it's a chance to grow, to get ahead. The words sound sweet, comforting, like honey, but they're lies, soft, poisonous lies. The journey to the city is a nightmare. You're chained by the neck, your feet blistered from miles of walking. You're now part of a caravan, not of travelers, but of boys and young men bound by iron and silence. The older ones barely speak. They've already learned that hope is dangerous. The younger ones cry out for their mothers until their voices fade or until the overseers whip them into quiet. You pass through beautiful land, green hills, ancient olive groves, shimmering coastlines, mountain paths where eagles fly overhead. But none of it matters. You don't see any of it. Your world has shrunk to the short length of chain between you and the boy ahead, to the dull pain in your feet, to the sickening realization that you may never go home again. At night, They drive stakes into the earth and lock your chains to the ground. You lie curled in the dirt, unable to sleep, listening to the choked sobs of the other boys. The iron around your neck is more than a shackle. It's your future, clamped tight and closing in. Sometimes the merchants bring visitors, men with clean clothes and soft hands. They walk slowly among you, inspecting each boy the way farmers look over animals at a market, calculating, judging, deciding what you're worth, not as a person, but as property. They poke and prod, checking you for any signs of illness or injury. Their eyes scan your body, judging what kind of work you might be suited for. It doesn't take long before you start to recognize the different kinds of buyers. The ones looking for farm labor are easy to spot. They search for strong arms, broad shoulders, signs of stamina, boys who look like they can survive back-breaking work in the fields, sunrise to sunset. Then there are those who want house servants. They pay attention to different things: quiet obedience, quick thinking, a soft way of speaking. They're looking for boys who won't rebel, who will serve quietly, cleanly, and without causing trouble. ... But there's a third kind, and you learn to fear them the most. These men are well dressed. Their clothes are fine and flowing, their accents polished. They smell of perfumes and wine. Their hands are decorated with gold and silver rings, and when they touch you, their fingers linger in ways that make your skin crawl. They're looking for something else entirely, not strength or skill. They want youth. They want beauty. And they want it not for labor, but for pleasure. When you finally reach the slave market in Athens, it's overwhelming, a full assault on every sense. The noise hits first, the shouting of traders, the cries of the enslaved, the barking of orders, the endless voices arguing over prices. Then the smell: sweat, filth, fear, urine, and something darker, something you can't quite name, but that turns your stomach. And then you see it: rows of bodies lined up like goods at a market. Some are children, barely old enough to walk, clinging to their mothers. Others are older men, worn down and hunched, their usefulness measured in whatever work their tired bodies can still offer. You remember what the older boys told you: keep your eyes down, don't make eye contact, don't give them a reason to notice you more than they already have. But it's too late for that. Before you're put up for sale, they clean and oil your body, not to show kindness, but because polished skin brings higher bids. The oil makes your muscles shine under the sun, makes every line and curve more noticeable. Someone has already made a decision about you. You're too good-looking for the fields, so you're grouped with the boys picked for house duty, the ones expected to serve behind closed doors. You're placed on the auction platform alongside others like you. The auctioneer's voice echoes across the square as he lists your details: your age, the region you're from, your health, your physique. He describes your looks, your mild manner, your pleasant personality, words that make certain men in the crowd lean in with growing interest. The bidding starts low. Then it begins to rise, fast. One voice, then another, and another. They compete over you like you're a rare animal, something valuable, something collectible. And through it all, you stand there, skin gleaming under the sun, heart pounding, knowing exactly what comes next. You stand stiffly on the raised platform, your body tense, trying to disappear into yourself. You wish you could vanish, become invisible, but you can't. All around you, unfamiliar hands are touching, probing. One man pries your mouth open to inspect your teeth. Another grips your hand to test your strength. A third runs his fingers through your hair, making comments about its color and feel, as if you can't hear him. You're no longer seen as a person. You're something to be bought, measured, judged, a product. The man who wins the bidding is named Lysander, though you won't know that right away. Right now, all you see is his smile, a satisfied, hungry smile as he counts silver coins into the merchant's hand. Lysander is middle-aged, soft-bodied, clearly someone who's never had to lift anything heavier than a wine cup. His hands are smooth, untouched by labor. He wears a fine silk tunic dyed a deep, rich purple, a color that screams money and rank. The way he looks at you makes your skin crawl. Something in his expression triggers an urge to run, but the chains around your ankles remind you there's nowhere to go. He brings you to his estate, a large home in one of the wealthiest parts of Athens. It's bigger than your entire village. You walk past tall marble columns, bright painted walls, and mosaic floors that show gods and heroes in vivid detail. The house smells of wine, incense, and cooked meat. Servants move quickly down the halls, balancing trays of food and drink. Their footsteps are quick, their faces tense. Many of them are boys, close to your age, each different in appearance, but all beautiful, and all wearing the same look you've begun to recognize. It's the look of someone who has stopped hoping for anything better. The face of captivity. The man who takes charge of you after the sale is named Demetrius. He's the overseer of the household. You learn that he was once a slave too, sold as a boy, just like you. But unlike you, he rose through the ranks, not through kindness or luck, but by being sharp, brutal, and obedient. Now, Demetrius runs the slaves with absolute control. He knows exactly how to break people, how to bend them into submission without leaving a mark. As he leads you through the house, he explains the rules. You will eat twice a day, porridge in the morning, bread and olives at night. You'll get clean clothes once per week. You will bathe only when ordered. You'll eat when told, sleep when told, move when told. Nothing is yours anymore, not your time, not your body, not even your name. You will speak only when spoken to. That's the first rule. You will never look a free person directly in the eyes. That's the second. You will never refuse an order, no matter what it is. That's the third. And then comes the one that chills your blood, the one that makes your heart pound in your chest. You are here to serve the master and his guests, in whatever capacity they require. Demetrius lets the words hang in the air before explaining further. His tone is casual, but there's something dark behind it. Serving might mean carrying trays of wine, or handing out food, or cleaning rooms. That's the part they say out loud. But then there's entertainment, and Demetrius says that word with a crooked smile that makes your stomach turn. What that really means, he adds, you'll find out soon enough. Some try to fight it, he says. Some cry, some run, some go quiet and hope it'll stop. But resistance, he says, only leads to pain. Obedience, though, that might earn you small rewards. Better food, a warmer place to sleep, maybe a few scraps of comfort, a ragged piece of cloth, a smoother blanket, a trinket no one else wanted. Just enough to make you think things could be worse. He takes you downstairs to the slave quarters. They're in the basement, far from the polished halls and colorful mosaics above. Down here, there's no beauty, just stone and silence. The sleeping area is a long row of small, narrow cells. Each one has a straw mattress, a thin, scratchy blanket, and a chamber pot. That's it. The walls are thick, built to trap sound. Soon, you understand why. At night, even with the heavy stone between you, you can still hear the muffled crying, whispers, the creak of movement, the sounds of suffering buried under the house, like something shameful. The other boys watch you with quiet eyes as you settle in. Some nod in sympathy. Others look away. Marcus is the first to speak to you. He's your age, maybe a little older. He's been here for 2 years. His face still looks like a boy's, but his eyes, there's something hollow in them, like he's already somewhere else. Alexios speaks next, older, his face marked by old scars. In hushed moments, he tells you what happens when the special guests come. He warns you that the word entertainment doesn't mean what you thought it did. Not here. And then there's Philemon. He's barely 14, but he looks older than any of you, not in his face, but in the way he carries himself. Quiet, heavy, like the weight he's carrying is far too much for someone his size. Philemon was once the son of a small merchant family. His life was simple but stable until everything fell apart. His father's business failed, and the creditors came like wolves. They took everything of value, the house, the goods, even the children. Everything of value, the house, the goods, even the children. That's how Philemon ended up here. He's been in Lysander's house for 6 months, and it's Philemon who finally tells you what really happens during the symposiums. In Greek society, the symposium was held up as a symbol of high culture, an elegant gathering where educated men shared wine and ideas, debated philosophy, politics, poetry, and the meaning of life. That's how history remembers it. But Philemon tells a different story, the real one. When the wine started flowing, the conversations often turned dark. And when the guests wanted more than just words, it was the slaves who were expected to provide it. They didn't just serve food or refill cups. They were part of the entertainment, whether they wanted to be or not. Philemon speaks plainly, his voice flat and distant, like he's describing something that happened to someone else. It's easier that way. It tells you how it works. Before the guests arrive, certain slaves, the youngest, the best looking, are chosen. They're bathed carefully, every inch of them cleaned. Their skin is scrubbed, then coated in oil to make them shine under the lamplight. They're dressed in special tunics. The cloth is so thin, it barely counts as clothing. It clings to the skin, highlighting every curve and line. The purpose isn't modesty, it's attraction. These rituals aren't for the slaves' comfort. They are for the pleasure of the men upstairs, men who speak of honor by day and treat other human beings like objects by night. These are the same men who write beautiful poetry about love, friendship, and morality. The same men who give speeches about justice and virtue. And yet, when the doors close and the torches are lit, they use their slaves however they please, then toss them aside when they're done. Philemon doesn't cry as he talks. He doesn't rage. His face stays blank. It's the expression of someone who learned long ago that feeling things only makes it worse. Sometimes, sometimes, they're even given jewelry, thin golden bracelets or delicate necklaces, not as gifts, but as signals, markers. These aren't the slaves used for hard labor. These are the ones chosen to be decorative, ornamental. Their bodies are part of the display. The symposium always begins in an orderly fashion. Guests lounge on couches arranged in a circle or semicircle around the room. The air is filled with conversation as slaves move quietly through the space, refilling cups and presenting dishes decorated with herbs and honey. At first, the topics are what you'd expect: democracy, the ideas of Socrates, recent battles, city politics. These men are proud of their minds. They see themselves as philosophers, poets, thinkers, the cultural elite of Athens. But as the night wears on and the wine keeps flowing, the atmosphere changes. What began as thoughtful discussion begins to crack. The jokes get dirtier. The tone gets louder. What was once a conversation becomes something else, cruder, more aggressive. A contest to impress, to dominate, to show off. And that's when the slaves, the ones who've been working quietly in the background, become the main focus. At first, it seems harmless. Pour him another drink. Massage this man's shoulders. Feed a few grapes to that guest over there. Simple tasks. Nothing alarming on the surface. But you start to notice things. The way the room quiets slightly when you walk past. The way their fingers brush against your skin when they hand you a cup. And don't pull away. The kind of attention that has nothing to do with wine or service. You begin to understand what's coming, long before anyone says it out loud. The first time it happens to you, you're still too naive to really grasp what's unfolding. A guest, older than your grandfather, waves you over and asks you to sit beside him. His smile is gentle, even kind, but there's something in his tone, something possessive, that makes your skin tighten. You obey because you have no choice. You sit beside him on the couch, and he tells you to sit with him, to share his wine. He says he just wants to talk, to hear about your homeland, your family, your life before this place. At first, his questions seem gentle. Where are you from? Do you miss your home? Are they treating you well here? I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. That night, your childhood ends, not quietly, but with violence, humiliation, and pain. Later, you lie in your cell, staring at the ceiling of cold stone. Your body throbs with pain, but it's the pain inside, the one that doesn't show, that leaves you hollow. You're not a person anymore. You're something else now. A thing, a possession, a body to be used when desired, then ignored when the wine is gone. And the worst part, this wasn't the worst of it. In the months that follow, you learn that what happened that first night was considered gentle by the standards of this house. Some guests bring requests, specific things they want done, particular cruelties they enjoy inflicting. Others treat it like a contest, a challenge to see who can cause the most damage, who can break a slave's spirit the fastest, the deepest, the most completely. The overseer doesn't stop it. He welcomes it. Broken slaves are easier to manage. That's the system. That's the point. You begin to see how the household runs, not just through obedience, but through a twisted hierarchy of abuse. The newest slaves take the worst of it. They're the fresh faces, the new meat the guests always ask for. Those who survive, who last long enough, might earn a different place. Some are moved to quieter roles, personal servants to less violent masters, or kitchen workers who rarely face the guests directly. But even that kind of promotion comes at a price, because it's not just about endurance, it's about something more. It's not just about survival. To last here, you have to give up something deeper. You have to surrender your pride, your sense of self, everything that once made you feel human. You learn to play the part they demand, even if it means helping to destroy what's left of your own dignity. Some still try to fight. Marcus, during his first month, made a run for it. He didn't get far. They caught him, dragged him back, and beat him so badly he couldn't walk straight for weeks. A limp never fully went away. Alexios once refused a task, something especially degrading. As punishment, they chained him in the courtyard for 3 days. No food, no water, exposed to the sun and the cold. The others were forced to pass by him, to see what happens when you say no. But you begin to understand that resistance doesn't always mean running or shouting. Some slaves retreat inward, so far that they seem barely alive. Their eyes are open, but there's no one left behind them. They do as they're told, without emotion, without voice, just breathing shadows. Others become sharp, not through rebellion, but through survival instinct. They learn to read faces, tone of voice, body language. They figure out how to avoid punishment not by resisting, but by predicting, submitting before it's demanded. And then there are the ones who don't survive at all. Some die from illness, others from injuries, a few from pure, crushing despair. You've seen it. Boys who simply stop eating, who stop talking, who stop trying. They fade, slowly, and then they're gone. The overseers don't mourn them. They replace them. The markets are always full. There's never a shortage of bodies. What breaks you isn't always the pain. It's the control. The system is precise, deliberate. They use psychology as much as force. Isolation is one of their most effective tools. You're stripped from everyone you've ever loved. Cut off. Surrounded only by others who are just as trapped. The other slaves might show kindness, but they can't protect you. They can't save you. Then there's unpredictability, a weapon just as powerful. You never know when your name will be called. You never know what they'll ask. You never know how bad the punishment will be. It could be nothing. It could be everything. The fear becomes constant, always humming under your skin. You learn that it's this uncertainty, this never-ending dread that wears people down faster than the lash ever could. But maybe, but perhaps, the most soul-destroying weapon they use is this. They take away your identity. Your name? Gone. Replaced with something smoother, something easier on Greek tongues. A name that doesn't belong to you, but to them. Your language? Forbidden. Your customs? Erased. Your gods? Forgotten. You wear their clothing now. You eat their food. You speak their words and bow before their deities. And little by little, the person you were begins to vanish. Not in one dramatic moment, but slowly, methodically, piece by piece, until even you can't remember who you used to be. And all the while, the men who visit the house, the ones who do these things, who demand these performances, these violations, are the very pillars of Athenian society. They're respected, even celebrated. Their names are recorded in stone, their ideas passed down through generations, their words quoted as wisdom. But in Lysander's dining room, those polished masks come off. Take Dionysius, for example, a statesman famous for his speeches on justice, civic duty, and the virtue of the republic. In public, he speaks of the sacred rights of free men. In private, he forces teenage boys to perform humiliating acts, all while reciting lines from Homer, as if quoting ancient poetry sanctifies the degradation. Then there's Cleomenes, a merchant known for funding public works, a man hailed for his generosity to the poor. But behind closed doors, he reveals a taste for violence, the kind that leaves scars. He says pain is educational, that it teaches young slaves their place in the natural order. To him, cruelty is a form of instruction, and perhaps worst of all, the sophist, a philosopher whose name appears in treatises on ethics, moderation, and the good life. He speaks in the Agora about virtue and self-restraint. He writes about the nobility of the human soul. But give him wine, and his mask dissolves. He becomes something darker, a man who inflicts pain, not despite his intellect, but because of it, who uses elaborate philosophical arguments to justify every depravity. He explains his abuse as if it were logic. He turns suffering into a thesis. What makes it worse is this: they don't think they're being hypocrites. Not really. In their minds, the rules, virtue, honor, restraint, apply only to free men. Slaves, to them, are something else entirely. Something beneath morality, beneath humanity. The virtues that exist between equals, fairness, compassion, even decency, simply don't apply to slaves. A man can treat his fellow citizens with generosity, respect, and honor, and still inflict cruelty on his slaves without feeling the slightest guilt. To him, there's no contradiction. Why? Because in his eyes, you're not a person, you're property. And this moral blindness isn't just a personal flaw, it runs through the entire society. This is the same culture that gave the world brilliant art, revolutionary politics, and timeless philosophy, but it also accepted, even celebrated, the total dehumanization of entire classes of people. That contradiction wasn't some unfortunate side effect. It was the foundation. The truth is hard to swallow. The leisure, the time to think, the space to create, the entire Athenian lifestyle, all of it was made possible by slave labor. The freedom of the few rested on the suffering of the many. As the months slip into years, you find ways to stay alive that would have once seemed impossible. You learn to read people, not from curiosity, but for survival. You pick up on the tiniest shifts in a guest's posture or tone. You memorize their habits, their preferences, their triggers. You know exactly when to speak, when to stay silent, how to hold a tray just right, how to smile without looking too proud. You adapt because you must. You also learn to leave your body while keeping up the appearance of obedience. You train your mind to detach, to float somewhere else, while your physical self goes through the motions. It's the only way to protect what little of your inner self is left. But that protection comes with a price. Every time you give in, every time you nod, obey, play along, something inside you fades. You lose pieces of yourself, little by little. The bright-eyed child who once laughed and ran through olive groves becomes a shadow. A hollow-eyed young man drifting through life like a ghost trapped in his own bow. And in this ghost world, the other slaves become your family. You cling to one another, not through words, but through small, unspoken acts of kindness. A shared crust of bread, a warning glance, a steadying hand when someone stumbles. You form a quiet network of protection, bound not by blood, but by pain and survival. You and the others develop a language of glances and gestures, silent signals to warn each other of danger or offer comfort without alerting the overseers. A flick of the eyes, a subtle shift in posture, a barely audible breath. You share what little food you can spare. You take turns standing watch during the few meager hours of sleep you're allowed. And when the nightmares become too much to bear alone, you hold each other in the darkness, not for warmth, but for something closer to survival. But even these small acts of solidarity are corrupted by the system that controls you. The constant pressure to please the master turns friends into rivals. The hope of slightly better treatment, a softer blanket, an extra piece of bread, fewer beatings, becomes a temptation strong enough to drive betrayal. You've seen it happen. Someone whispers about a planned escape. Another quietly reports a fellow slave's minor defiance. Each act of treachery chips away at the fragile trust you've tried to build. The very bonds that keep you sane are twisted into weapons used to tighten your chains. Some nights, lying on your straw mattress in the basement's damp silence, you try to remember your mother's face, but the image has started to fade. In its place, you see the faces of the men who use you. You try to hear your father's voice, but it's drowned out by the laughter of the guests and the cries of other slaves. Your past is slipping away, becoming as vague and distant as a dream you barely remember. Your present, though, this nightmare, stretches out endlessly, with no end in sight, and the future, you don't even dare to imagine one. The physical abuse is constant and varied. Some guests prefer subtle psychological games, testing your boundaries with words and quiet threats. Others are more direct, brutal in their demands, unapologetic in their violence. You move differently too, quieter, smaller. You've learned to occupy as little space as possible, to blend into corners, to disappear in plain sight. You anticipate commands before they're given, calculate the safest way to obey them, and do so with a precision that earns you the overseer's grim approval. You hate that part, that you've become so good at being invisible. By now, you've memorized the preferences of the regular guests. You know who likes their wine sweet and who prefers it mixed with water. Who wants a foot massage before the evening begins? Who wants silence? Who wants screaming? You can recite their desires like scripture. You know exactly what to expect, and yet you still feel the dread each time the symposium doors open. New slaves arise regularly. Some are as young as you were when you arrived. Their eyes are too wide, their steps too slow. You remember that confusion, the disbelief that this is real. You try to warn them when you can, discreetly, briefly, a glance, a whisper. Sometimes they listen, most of the time they don't. But it doesn't matter. Sooner or later, they all learn. Some break quickly, others fight longer. A few, the rare few, try to escape. You've stopped hoping they'll succeed. You've seen too many recaptured and dragged back, their bodies broken past the point of recognition. The overseers make an example of them, and the message is always the same. This house has no exits. You've started to forget your old name. It comes to you in flashes, like something overheard in a dream. You mouth it sometimes when you're alone, just to keep it alive. But it feels foreign now, like it belonged to someone else, someone soft and free, someone who didn't know what it meant to be owned. That part of you is still in there, a small ember, buried under ash and silence. But whether it will ever burn again, you can't say. Even a simple gesture, passing a piece of bread under the table, adjusting someone's blanket when they're shivering, helping clean a wound in secret, becomes a defiant declaration of worth. In a world built to strip them of their humanity, the smallest kindness becomes an act of rebellion. You begin to participate in these quiet resistances. You memorize the names of the new boys so that someone will remember them when they can't remember themselves. You take turns staying awake when one of your cellmates is too haunted to sleep. You carve a symbol from your childhood into the stone behind your straw mat, hidden where only you will ever see it. It's not much, but it's yours, a mark of life. Some of the older slaves begin to teach you more than survival. They teach you how to read and write, quietly, carefully, using bits of charcoal and stolen parchment. They teach you how to listen for shifts in the master's patterns, how to anticipate inspections, how to hide what must be hidden. They pass on these skills like heirlooms, quietly sustaining a lineage of knowledge, of defiance, of endurance. None of it changes the brutal system that holds you, but it reminds you that the system hasn't fully claimed you, not entirely. Because even as your body belongs to them, your mind, the deepest part of you, still flickers with independent thought, still imagines something more, even if only for a moment. And in a world that demands your silence, your suffering, your compliance, the simple act of remembering who you are is nothing short of revolutionary. You comply at first, because what else can you do? But something inside you feels different this time. Not rage, not fear, not even sorrow. Just a hollow space where something vital used to be. A numbness that terrifies you more than pain. As the night drags on and the laughter grows louder, it happens. Your mind detaches completely. You are no longer there. You watch yourself from above, from the ceiling, from beyond the room, a spectator to your own degradation. And that's when you realize what's broken, your last thread of hope. It's not dramatic. It doesn't come with tears or screams. It's just absence, a quiet resignation that this will never end, that no one is coming, that your name, your language, your family, they're already gone. What remains is a shell, an obedient, efficient, hollow shell. But even in that moment of despair, something stirs, a whisper, barely audible beneath the noise. Remember, the stories, the names, the symbols carved in the dark, the hands that held yours when no one else would. You may be broken, but you are not erased, not yet. That night, after they finally leave you alone, you lie in your cell staring at the ceiling. The pain in your body is unimportant. What matters is what you do next. You turn toward the wall where you've hidden your secret carvings, a name, a face, a symbol. And with what strength you have, you scratch another mark. You don't know why. It won't change anything. It won't save you. But it proves something to yourself. You still exist, and you still remember. Before they're voiced, reacting with practiced smiles, performing without hesitation. You don't flinch, you don't cry, you don't resist. You move like a shadow, a puppet, a shell. They praise you now, not with kindness, but with satisfaction, like a craftsman admiring a well-made tool. You've been reshaped to fit their needs, molded into something that no longer threatens them with memory, identity, or will. But deep down, buried so deep even you forget it's there, something tiny still remains untouched. Not hope exactly, because hope is dangerous, but awareness. The knowledge that this wasn't always your life, that there was a time before the chains, before the cold stares and cruel hands. And that knowledge, though silent, refuses to die. Still, your days pass in a blur of submission. Your body moves through corridors and chambers, fulfilling every order with mechanical precision. Your nights are filled with silence and the distant echoes of suffering from neighboring cells. Sometimes you hear soft sobs. Sometimes you hear nothing at all. The scariest sound of all. The sound of someone finally giving up. The game the aristocrats invented becomes a recurring tradition. They give it a name. They refine the rules. It spreads among their circles. What was once a random act of cruelty becomes ritualized entertainment, a new social sport. They toast each other with wine and philosophy, discussing the moral implications of their actions, not to question them, but to justify them. It's all theoretical, they say, intellectual, like studying the anatomy of pain in real time. Your ability to disconnect from yourself becomes your greatest weapon. You float through it all. You watch. You listen. You remember. Not just the suffering, but the players, their faces, their names, the contradictions in their words. And maybe, just maybe, that quiet, hidden part of you is waiting. Not for rescue, but for a chance, a crack in the system, a moment of weakness in your captors, a whisper of rebellion. Because if you're going to be a shadow, you can still hunt them. Purchases, not because you want to, but because you no longer have a choice. You stand silently beside Demetrius as he inspects the merchandise, checking teeth, muscles, posture, and obedience. The traders nod approvingly when they see you. Well trained, they say. Disciplined, docile. You are living proof of what their product can become. You learn to spot the signs. Which children are likely to break quickly, which might resist, which have that flicker in their eyes that will get them killed. You wonder if you looked like that once, if some older slave had seen the same spark in you and pitied you, knowing what lay ahead. The worst part is when they look at you, the new ones, eyes wide, frightened, pleading for help you can't give. You want to speak, to warn them, to run with them, but you've forgotten how to run, and the words catch in your throat, swallowed by years of silence. All you can offer is a glance, a barely perceptible shift of the eyes, a silent message. Don't trust them, don't trust me. This place will take everything. Back at the house, the cycle continues. New slaves arrive. Old ones vanish. The guests indulge themselves. The overseers maintain order. And you perform your role with flawless precision. But deep inside, something quietly resists the total collapse of your identity. It might be the way you count the days by the moon through the tiny window in your cell, or how you trace your old name into the dust beneath your cot when no one is watching, or the way you memorize the features of every guest, every wound, every injustice, not because you believe in justice, but because forgetting would mean they've truly won. This memory, this refusal to forget, no matter how silent, is the last part of you they haven't claimed. Be taught, or if it's something a person must be born with. One of them, a man whose voice you've come to recognize from countless lectures and public speeches, argues that justice is the foundation of any true society. A just man, he says, swirling his wine, treats all beings with fairness, even those of lower station. That is the mark of virtue. And then, with the same hand that gestures so elegantly while speaking of ethics, he grabs your wrist and yanks you down to his couch, laughing as the others barely glance up. His fingers dig into your skin as he murmurs something obscene, a command wrapped in philosophy. You freeze. Something sharp and cold runs through your chest. Not fear, not exactly. It's clarity. In that moment, as his words echo with hollow contradiction, something inside you shifts again. But this time, it doesn't die. It wakes up. You see the farce for what it is. These men talk of virtue, wisdom, and justice, but they don't believe a word of it. Not when it threatens their comfort. Not when it asks them to see you as human. And suddenly, the memories that have been haunting you, your parents, your name, the wind in the mountains, don't hurt as much. They steady you, because they are yours, because they are real, because they prove that once you lived. You gently pull your wrist free. It's a small act, one that might be brushed off, overlooked, or punished, but it's deliberate. You meet the man's eyes for the briefest second, not with defiance, just presence. He narrows his gaze, sensing something. He doesn't press the command. He waves you away instead. You return to the wine jug, your hands trembling. No one notices, but something has changed. A seed has been planted, not of rebellion, not yet, but of remembrance. That night, back in your cell, you whisper your real name into the darkness. Not loudly, not confidently, just enough to hear it yourself. The first step isn't escape. It's refusing to forget who you were and starting to wonder who you might still become. But the irony is hard to ignore. These very men who abuse children and torture the powerless are sitting around, calmly debating the meaning of virtue. And you, their victim, are standing silently beside them, holding their wine. They talk about justice while committing acts of cruelty. They imagine the perfect society while turning daily life into a nightmare for everyone beneath them. As you listen, you come to a realization. Their deep thinking and polished arguments don't make their behavior more understandable. In fact, it makes it worse. They aren't acting out of ignorance. They know what they're doing. They have the intelligence to recognize that their actions are wrong, but they choose to do them anyway. These are not mindless brutes. They are educated, thoughtful people who have found ways to justify their violence and domination. And that's what makes them truly horrifying. This realization brings a strange kind of clarity. You see now that the system isn't built on ignorance or outdated thinking. It's not the result of confusion or lack of understanding. It's been created and is upheld by people who know exactly what they're doing. People who understand what's right, but still choose what's wrong. The art they produce, the deep conversations they have, the political changes they introduce, none of it reflects any real moral growth. These are just different ways human beings express themselves. And they exist comfortably alongside brutal cruelty, without conflict or guilt. Time passes in this state of clear-eyed despair. You become skilled at staying unseen, mastering the quiet, careful movements of someone who's expected to be useful, but invisible. You learn how to glide through the household unnoticed, becoming real only when someone needs something from you. You see new slaves brought in, young, hopeful, not yet broken. You watch as they are crushed by the same machinery that has harmed so many before them. The same patterns repeat, endlessly. The same violence, the same exploitation. Nothing changes. And you witness it all. You watch the steady stream of well-respected men who drop their public faces behind closed doors. Some nights, standing at your small window, you look up at the same stars you once saw from your family's rooftop. You think about your parents and wonder if they're still alive. Did they ever think about the sun they gave up just to survive? You picture your siblings as adults now, maybe with children of their own, telling stories about the brother who disappeared when they were still young. But those thoughts don't hurt anymore. They've become distant, like a soft tune playing far away, beautiful, but separate from your life now. You've trained yourself to remember without aching. It's become a kind of practice, being able to hold on to memories without letting them pull you back. You can think of your past without wanting it back. That ability has become a quiet survival skill. When the end comes, there's no announcement, no sense of closure. It just arrives. You're probably around 25 by now, though you don't keep track anymore. Time here isn't measured by seasons. It's measured by how much you've suffered. Your body carries the marks of everything you've endured. Scars that never healed right, joints that throb from old injuries, a cough that won't go away and suggests something deeper is wrong. But more than that, you're no longer as useful as you once were. The same guests who once competed to have you now barely glance your way. There are newer slaves now, untouched, younger, more appealing. Compared to them, your practiced obedience seems ordinary. You're not special anymore. You're turning into what every slave eventually becomes. Invisible again, but in a different way. Ignored instead of desired. One morning, Demetrius calls you to his quarters. He informs you calmly that you're being sold to a mining operation in the mountains. There's no anger in his voice, no sympathy either. It's not punishment or reward, it's business. You're no longer worth the cost of keeping you around as entertainment, but you're still fit enough for hard labor. The mining camps are where slaves are sent to die, slowly. Everyone knows this. So do you. The work is brutal, the environment deadly. Most don't last more than a few months. It's not an execution, technically, but it's not life either. You hear the news without any emotion. You've lived so long without feeling that even the idea of dying barely moves you. Whether it happens in the mines or here in the house, what does it matter? In all the ways that count, you've already been gone for a long time. The end of your life feels more like a formality than a change. But as you're getting ready to be transported, something unexpected happens. Marcus, the boy who arrived around the same time as you, approaches during your final night in the cell you've known for years. Somehow, he's managed to survive, even succeed in his own way. He now works as a personal servant to Lysander's wife. The work is lighter, the abuse happens less often. He eats regularly. Without saying a word, Marcus presses something into your hand, a small piece of metal, sharpened at one end. It's crude, but it can work. It could unlock a door or open a vein. His silence makes the message unmistakable. You still have a say in how your story ends. That night, you lie awake, holding the metal shard, turning over your options. You could try to run. The odds of making it out are next to none, and the price of failure would be unbearable. You could attack your captors, cause some damage, maybe even take one of them with you, knowing full well you'd be killed right after. Or you could use the metal on yourself, ending your life on your own terms, avoiding the slow destruction waiting in the mines. Each path has its own pull. Escape offers a moment of hope, even if it's only a fantasy. You might feel freedom again, even briefly, before the inevitable end. Striking back would bring some kind of justice, even if short-lived, finally letting you return a small piece of the pain they've forced on you. And suicide would give you control. It would let you leave the world on your own terms, with some final dignity. But as the sky begins to lighten and morning draws near, you make a different decision. You hide the shard in a spot where another slave might someday find it. The way Marcus gave you a choice, you now leave one behind for someone else. Your story might be coming to a close, but others still have chapters ahead. Maybe one of them will write an ending different from yours. The journey to the mines winds through hills and forests that stir long-buried memories. You pass through mountain trails that remind you of running and playing as a child. You see clear streams where you once caught fish with your bare hands. You pass villages that resemble your own, places that could hold the faces of relatives you'll never see again. You don't try to escape. The chains around your wrists would make it impossible, and the guards know what they're doing. Instead, you use the journey to quietly say goodbye. You watch birds flying overhead and remember how you once dreamed of flying. You breathe in the scent of wildflowers and think of your mother's garden. You listen to the wind move in through the pine trees and hear your father's voice in the sound. And then you arrive. The mining camp is worse than you had imagined. Hundreds of slaves are already there, working in conditions so brutal that life in the household now seems easy by comparison. The tunnels are narrow and unstable, collapsing without warning. The air is thick with dust. It scrapes your lungs, blinds your eyes. The daily demands are impossible to meet. The entire system is designed to push each person to their limit, and then break them. But even here, in this place where life is strict to its most painful form, you discover something unexpected. The slaves have built something of their own here. A quiet society shaped by survival, resistance, and mutual care. They share food when they can. They take turns helping those who are too weak to meet the day's demands. They formed careful, wide-reaching systems of communication that connect people across the entire camp. But most importantly, they remember. In hushed voices during stolen moments of rest, they share pieces of who they were before this life. They speak the names of family members. They describe the traditions, beliefs, and everyday routines of the dozens of cultures they came from. They preserve the languages their captors have tried to erase. In doing this, they affirm one another's humanity in a way their owners never have. Your story becomes part of that living memory. You're remembered as the boy from a mountain village who survived years of servitude in an Athenian home. The child who was sold so his family might survive, who endured horrors no one should face, and who still held on to pieces of his identity. The young man who, even when he had nothing left to feel, passed along hope to someone else. The end doesn't come in violence or chaos. It comes in quiet surrender. Your lungs, damaged from years of breathing in dust and stone, finally give out. Your body fails after one collapse too many. You die in the dark, without spectacle, surrounded by others who knew what you endured. They promise to remember your name and to carry your story forward. But your death isn't truly an ending. Stories like yours don't disappear. They're passed down, whispered through the years, told in places where the powerful rarely look. They serve as reminders that behind every civilization we celebrate, there are lives that were used, discarded, and forgotten. That behind the beauty of ancient art, philosophy, and political progress lies a structure of suffering so massive it almost can't be measured. The same society that gave us democracy, theater, and reason also accepted, without question, the total dehumanization of entire groups of people. These weren't mistakes or contradictions. They were part of the same design, two sides of the same structure. And if we're being honest, we have to admit that echoes of that system are still with us today. They may be hidden more carefully now, wrapped in legal language and economic complexity, but the truth remains. The strong still live comfortably at the expense of the weak. Societies still protect their ease by allowing others to carry the burden. The vulnerable continue to vanish into systems built to use them up, while allowing everyone else to look the other way. We live in a world where children are bought and sold for exploitation, while public conversations focus on abstract questions of consent and personal freedom, where the same companies responsible for creating waves of addiction sponsor research into mental health, where technology that was meant to inform and connect becomes a tool for targeting and harming the most defenseless, especially the young. The same moral failure that let ancient Greek thinkers torture slaves while writing about ethics is still with us. Today, people proudly promote human rights while buying products made by children in factories. The same mental split that allowed respected philosophers to justify cruelty now enables today's leaders to speak about justice and fairness while ignoring the widespread abuse that props up the systems they manage. We like to believe we've moved past such brutality. But human cruelty doesn't always disappear. It changes shape. It becomes more polished, more carefully explained, and more distant from the people who benefit from it. The suffering is still there. It's just harder to see. The trade remains the same. The pain of some turned into the comfort, pleasure, or profit of others. The Greek symposiums, where slaves were beaten, humiliated, or worse for the amusement of the powerful, have their modern versions. We see it in industries that profit from sexualizing children. We see it on social media platforms that drive young people towards self-harm for the sake of engagement and reach. We see it in economic systems that quietly demand suffering as the price of someone else's convenience. Human lives are still treated as disposable, used up and discarded without consequence. The people in charge may change, the tools and technologies may evolve, but the basic truth remains. The powerful continue to sacrifice the vulnerable for their own convenience. One of the most unsettling parallels with the ancient world is how today's systems hide behind the same kind of intellectual complexity that once justified slavery and abuse. Legal systems are so intricate they blur what should be obvious. Economic theories give a respectable face to exploitation. New technology is used as an excuse to set aside the most basic standards of human decency. We continue to create art that moves people, while ignoring suffering that should shame us. We publish powerful poetry, while children disappear into abusive systems. We invent advanced technology, while algorithms built to keep people online push fragile, young minds towards self-harm. We have endless conversations about ethics, yet allow the most basic ethical violations to continue in our names every single day. The boy whose story you followed through these pages died in silence, deep in a mountain mine. His name was never recorded. His pain wasn't written down in the histories. His voice was erased because those in power decided it didn't matter. But his experience hasn't disappeared. It lives on in the stories of every person who's been treated as less than human for someone else's gain. Right now, somewhere in the world, a child is being sold because their family is desperate. Another young person is being broken by a system built to take advantage of their pain. Someone else is just beginning to realize that the society they believed in, the one that claimed to stand for justice and fairness, is built on quiet, deliberate cruelty. Their stories are still unfolding. Their voices are still speaking. They're still waiting for someone to hear them, to bear witness, and to remember. We must name them, and we must honor their humanity. The issue isn't whether these things happen. They do. All the time, in every part of the world. They're just hidden in plain sight, protected by how easily people choose not to see. The real question is whether we'll keep repeating the ancient pattern of moral denial, benefiting from cruelty while still convincing ourselves we're ethical people. Whether we'll continue telling each other comforting stories about how far we've come while real people still suffer out of view. Or whether we'll finally admit the truth that the price of everything we call civilization has always been paid by those who were never given a choice. The boy who died in that mountain mine died for the same reason children die today, because societies always find ways to justify the unjust when it suits their interests. Because cruelty, when it's organized and normalized, stops looking like cruelty at all. The marble buildings still echo with his cries. The beautiful floors and art still cover what was built on suffering. And in today's polished cities, in our respected institutions, the same old horrors live on. They wear modern clothes. They speak new languages. But the harm they cause is no different. We are no better. They were us, and we are them. The only thing that separates us is time, and time has never stopped human beings from doing harm. It has only made it easier to forget.